I think there's so much to be said about when somebody works on a passion project for years and years and then finally gets to release it, especially one that's taken so long. There will have been so many times that they wanted to throw in the towel and didn't, and I've always got so much respect for those people that didn't quit and saw the project all the way through to the end. And today's video is kind of a celebration of one of those types of projects. A brand new graphic novel that's just come out, that took the creator over a decade to write and draw and complete, and I'm going to be celebrating its release in the most Slimehouse way possible, by transforming the main character into a retro-style action figure. Now, this wasn't just a standard build or anything like that. What started off as just my normal workflow quickly switched up, and I ended up incorporating some brand new technology into this one, trying some new things that I've never done before on the channel, and as usual, I ran into a few little challenges that I had to overcome as well. So if all that sounds like a bit of you, as always, kick back, make sure you're comfy, and let's do this. Welcome to the world of Huxley, the super stylish, dystopian, futuristic sci-fi brainchild of writer, creator, and concept artist Ben Morrow. Now, I'm not going to go into the world building and lore and everything else that makes this story and these characters so rich and interesting. There's already a very awesome documentary that recently dropped that does all that. I'll link it below. But what I find most interesting about this whole project is firstly, just how incredibly unique everything looks, and also how much of a labour of love this whole thing was for Ben that's invented it all, and how now, after over a decade of chipping away at it, it's finally been made into a real thing that people can dive into and experience for themselves. Now, as a concept artist, Ben's worked on so many well-known and recognisable IPs over the years, from Neil Blomkamp movies to Bungie's Halo series, all properties that I'm a big fan of, especially their style of alien design and armour and tech aesthetics and stuff. So it was no surprise that when it came to Ben having free reign to create his own world and his own characters, that they would all look as incredible as they do. And over the 10 years that he was working on Huxley, he not only self-funded a series of incredibly high-end trailers and shorts that you can watch right now on YouTube, but he's also wrote and hand-drawn an entire graphic novel, which is not only full of beautiful illustrations, but also very thick and chunky, and you only have to have a quick flick through this thing to imagine just how much work must have gone into it from start to finish. Now, as I mentioned, there has just been a really good documentary released, talking all about Huxley, the lore of the world that the story's set in, all the different characters, and also everything that you need to know about the recently released graphic novel that Ben's wrote and illustrated, that you can actually buy right now. And in that documentary, they also spoke about the future of Huxley, what else they would love to see, one of those things being the possibility of one day maybe even having a Huxley line of action figures. Which is obviously where I come into it. So I was contacted a couple of months ago by Thames and Hudson, the company that have put out this beautiful graphic novel for Ben, and I was asked if I'd be up for looking into and designing what I think a toy line for the Huxley series might look like. And being somebody that was already following the project already and being a big fan of the style of it, obviously, to me it was a dream project. It was a no-brainer, like, yeah, of course I would be. I was also kinda given the option to choose any of the characters from the story that I think would be the most fun to transform into an action figure, which was kinda hard because there's so many very cool looking character designs in this world and in this story, and honestly, I'm confident that I could make a really cool looking action figure out of any of them. I mean, look at this guy! But with this being the first ever Huxley action figure, I felt that going with the titular character was probably the best move. Not to mention that there were a few things about his colour scheme and his design that I thought were not only going to make for a really awesome looking toy, but they were also going to allow me to test myself in areas that I hadn't really had a chance to yet. So as my usual ritual goes when I'm working on anything like this, I threw something on the telly, fired up my sculpting app, NOMAD on the iPad, and got myself all settled in for a big late night retro action figure sculpting session. Now bear in mind, NOMAD is a very simple, cheap application. It's definitely not meant for creating stuff of this level of detail really. It's by no means a professional piece of software. All the things that were sculpted for Huxley before this would have been done in something industry standard like ZBrush, but NOMAD is just what I'm used to using, and that's why it's always my personal go-to. So what I'm doing right now is just moving some shapes around and trying to get something that looks like the silhouette of the Huxley robot. As usual as well, I'm not trying to create a one-to-one exact replica of the thing that I'm referencing. I'm obviously going to take some artistic liberties with it, but I want it to at least have the essence, the feel and the spirit of the Huxley design that's already there. Now obviously I do have the book, I've got some screenshots from the short film, and I also have these as well. So Ben sent me these, Thames and Hudson sent me these, the people that have commissioned this video. And basically what I believe these are 3D prints of the exact 3D CGI character that's in the Huxley short films and the trailers and those videos that you can watch on YouTube. And these are 3D prints of those exact character renders that were used in those films. So you couldn't really ask for a better reference. When I redesign Warhammer figures and stuff, I always work with a miniature like this. And although it's like kind of small, like I can't measure it and get exact dimensions, you couldn't really ask for a better point of reference than a model in front of you. Now, as much as I was having fun creating this toy, I was very self-conscious because not only is Huxley Ben's baby, but this is a character that was designed by a legit professional concept artist, meaning that every shape and every surface, every rivet, every pipe has probably been placed there for a very specific reason, and I wanted to make sure that I recreated everything faithfully. Now, don't get me wrong, obviously toy design is a medium all of its own and things will change. There's lots of old toys of existing properties that were not exact replicas of the thing that they were based on. The real Ghostbusters Ecto 1 isn't exactly the same. Most T800 figures are a little softer and less complex in places, but I wanted to make sure that if I did have to change or simplify anything, that I didn't take it too far in any of my own directions, so at the core it still looked and felt like that character that means so much to Ben and to the Huxley story. So I've been working on this sculpt now for a good few hours, and I feel that although it's like nowhere near there yet, I've got something that's really starting to take shape and has a lot of potential. Now, there's no way that I'm going to get this finished tonight or anything like that. There's going to be so much that goes into this thing before it's ready to go to print. It's a really complex design, so I've got to think about all the individual parts that it's got to be cut into. I've then got to think about what kind of resins each one of those parts are going to be printed in. I've got to think about balancing. Obviously this guy has got a massive arm and tiny legs, so I'm going to have to kind of use that big arm as a third leg in order for him to stand up. There's certain parts of it that I've got to dial back and change so that I can add articulation to it. When you're doing a 3D render, it doesn't really matter if things slightly clip into each other and stuff, like from a different angle. If his shoulder pad clips into his antenna and you can't really see it, it doesn't matter. But with a figure, you can't do that, so I've got to think about all these little things. I can't have stuff rubbing against each other, I can't have friction. I want it to have a very particular type of articulation, which is going to be a whole beast of its own, so I've got to think about that as well. So I'm going to spend a few more hours on it now before I go to bed, because it's getting late, or early should I say, and hopefully by the end of the week I've got something that we can start getting printed, because yeah, this is going to be a really complex design, possibly even the most complex figure that I've ever made on this channel. And that is absolutely what it ended up being. I spent the rest of the week grinding away at this design, and eventually, after a ton of working out, a lot of moving things around just to get him right, and my iPad crashing about 100 times in a row, I ended up with a retro style Huxley action figure that I was very happy with. So from there, it was off to the Elegos to get all 19 separate individual pieces 3D printed, hoping that the balancing and the weight distribution and the articulation and everything else was all going to work in reality the way that I'd imagined when I was designing it. Both my printers would be working non-stop around the clock for almost a week to get all these parts made, and as anybody that prints stuff for themselves will know, it's a very temperamental process. The slightest little thing off and prints will fail, and I had lots of that while working on these. Stuff not supported enough, pieces falling off the plate for whatever reason, and I went through quite a lot of this resin to get a decent usable selection of parts. Now all the main pieces were printed in Resi 1 Tough 74, which is a resin that's specifically made for action figures. I've spoken about it many times on this channel before, and as you can imagine, I went through quite a lot here, so big shouts to them for always keeping me nice and stocked up. speaking of trying not to waste any resin as well, another really useful technique that you can do when you're 3D printing is print stuff hollow. It's also lighter when you do this, so there's less chance of it breaking off any of the supports. When you print hollow though, you do have to add drain holes to help prevent any uncured resin from getting trapped inside the model. So before you can do any painting or prepping or anything like that, you have to make sure all of these holes are filled in. And for this, I just use a little bit more UV resin, which I drop in little tiny blobs and then cure quickly with a UV torch. Next up was everybody's favourite part of model making, toy making, kit bashing, scratch building, whatever your poison is, which of course is a bit of sanding, which in this case was a lot of sanding, because not only was this the most complex toy that I'd ever made, but I'd also printed multiples to make sure that I had options. So this was definitely a long night of grinding away at these pieces to get rid of all of them ugly little pitted holes that's left by the printing supports, but once it were all done, I'd got a really nice clean selection of pieces all created from Resi 1 Tough 74. So that were all them parts sorted, but there were still quite a few other pieces that I needed to print out in different types of resins. I designed this pipe that comes out the front of his chest to be a separate piece, so I thought that that would be better in a more bendy material, so I printed out a bunch of those using black F69, a Resi 1 flexible resin that I've used quite a few times now on the channel. And then I also used some leftover resin that actually made an appearance in my last video, some Resi 1 F39T, which is another flexible resin that I mixed with some blue alcohol inks that I thought would be perfect for these separate eye lenses that I'd created, specifically for a cool little idea that I wanted to try, but I'll get to talking about that a little bit more later on in the video. Next up was a whole day of priming, going straight in with the main base colour that was actually one of the main things that drew me to wanting to create the figure of the Huxley robot from the beginning, as I was yet to paint a toy that was all yellow. And even though I were excited about doing it and adding one to my shelf that was a whole new colour scheme, I also knew that when it comes to painting, yellow is one of those colours that can often lead to problems, which is something that I would definitely be reminded of while working on this project. So I spent pretty much the whole day yesterday just priming and refining and sanding this guy. What often happens when you do a resin 3D print is you get all the support marks off, you sand it all, you start priming it, and then you start noticing more little support marks that you missed when you were doing that first initial sand. And it's really annoying because once you've spray painted something, you don't want to be sanding it again, so you have to wait for it to dry for hours and hours before you can go in with some fine sandpaper or the Dremel with a buffing cup and clean them up. So I'm still noticing some now that I need to clean off, but overall I've got it like 99% there. Now the primer that I went with was this Colourforge Sunset Yellow matte finish, and normally when I use Colourforge I have no complaints whatsoever. They give you a really nice finish. However, this yellow, like, I do have my gripes with it. For some reason it does just come out a little bit watery, and I've noticed that this one and the white one in particular do the same thing. The white one's even worse than this. Now I know that white and yellow in general in hobby paints can be quite temperamental, so it doesn't surprise me. It's a shame though, because it is the perfect colour for Huxley, like a muted, dusky, utilitarian yellow, the perfect colour for him, but it hasn't given me the nice overall finish that I need. I need like a really nice uniform yellow across this whole thing for that retro toy aesthetic. I want this to look like it came straight out of a blister pack, straight off a production line, and if I've got like uneven tones throughout and I've got little bits where it's ran into the recesses and built up a different colour and things, it's just not going to work for me. So what I've done is pulled out a bunch of yellows and golden browns and tan colours and that kind of thing, and I'm going to attempt to mix my own colour so that what I can do is go over the whole thing again with an airbrush. This will not only hopefully give me that nice even tone that I need, because I can just keep going over it, and I've nearly used this whole can up, so I don't want to keep using this. And then also it will give me a paint if I need to cut in later, if I make any mistakes when I'm painting the pipes and the ridges and things with a darker colour, which, let's face it, I'm probably going to need to use. You'll also notice as well I've printed out and painted multiples just because I want to get the most perfect one for Ben. So if I've got a few different options, if this arm's better than that arm, or those legs are better than those legs, and that body fits better with those legs, then I've got a few different options. I want to make this as perfect for Ben as possible. So what I'm going to do now is get on to mixing this colour, try and get a perfect colour match or as close as I can get it, and then I'll catch up with you a little bit later when I'm doing some airbrushing. So the airbrushing on this figure was going to be pretty straightforward for the most part. Just standard block colouring. Something that was much less familiar territory for me though was the articulation system that I wanted to make for this guy, which as I mentioned earlier was a whole beast of its own. Now I have experimented with many different types of articulation in the past on this channel. Some worked good, some worked alright, others have been very simple, but I really wanted to push myself with the articulation on this figure and not only create a ball joint articulation system, something that I've never done before, but also create it in a very different way using a whole new material on a totally new piece of equipment. So this right here is the Bamboo P1S Combo 3D filament printer. Now this were very kindly sent to me by Bamboo a few weeks ago, and I do plan on doing a completely separate video on it. So I don't want to concentrate too much on the machine itself right now, but because I had it and because I got this idea in mind for a particular type of articulation, I couldn't resist trying it for this project, especially with all the different types of filament that Bamboo had sent me to experiment with. Now filament printing, FDM printing, whatever you want to call it, is nothing like the 3D printing that you will have seen me do on the channel before. It uses different types of materials, it's used for very different things, and other than the fact that they're both called 3D printers, they couldn't operate any more different. Think of an FDM printer and a resin printer like an aeroplane and a helicopter. They both go up in the air, they both fly, but in totally different ways. So the reason that I wanted to use an FDM printer for this kind of articulation is that you can print in materials that are much springier and harder wearing, you can create joints that snap together, and the type of joint that I had in mind here for this Huxley figure, if it worked, were going to be one that would be perfect for FDM printing. So this is the system that I've come up with for this Huxley figure, and I say that I've come up with it, this ball and socket, but basically it's one that I found on printables, like an open source ball and socket system that I've then taken and recreated and modified to fit it the way that I need it to work. So the original is like a man that snaps together and you can make this little figure, but the sockets didn't really work how I needed them, so I basically took the fundamentals of that design and then recreated it and modified it and made it so it's not only a little bit smaller, but it also snaps together and locks in place a lot sturdier. So for the socket part of the filament, I went with PETG, which is a nice hard wearing filament, and for the ball part, I've gone with one called TPU, which is kind of squishy and leaves you with something that feels a lot like rubber. Now I've heard that this TPU can sometimes be hard to use. Not all printers can put it through their nozzle, but the one that I've used is a TPU for AMS that's specifically made for the model printer that I've got, and it worked perfect for the ball, so the ball is kind of squishy, and then the socket part is made in the PETG, which is nice and hard, and they snap together and lock together perfectly, so hopefully they will work really nice as a ball and socket articulation system for this Huxley figure. So that square there will fit into the arm, the round bit will fit into the body, and once it's all glued together, it will hopefully hold things up nice and sturdy, although I won't know until the whole thing is printed and painted if it's going to work as good as I've pictured it in my head or as good as I need it to. I did also change it quite a bit as well, because the original one was quite loose, so I've experimented with lots of different versions, slightly expanding the circle, slightly shrinking the socket and things, just trying to get it perfect, and I feel like I've now got it really nice and sturdy. But like I said, we won't be able to tell until the very end of the build, so yeah, who knows? So I'm just going to say it right off the bat, painting Huxley was a real challenge. I already mentioned the issues that I had with the yellow, which as I also mentioned were expected issues. I chose to sculpt and paint Huxley out of all of the other characters for a reason. I was embracing the challenge, but when you're working with a colour this light, not only can it be hard to cut back when you're going over with another darker colour and you make a mistake, but also every speck of dirt or mark or grubby handprint or whatever shows up instantly, and it really was a constant battle trying not to cross-contaminate the colours while I was painting all of these pieces. Now Huxley has this kind of repair bonding tape all over him, but rather than just paint it all in one colour, I switched it up a bit so it looked like they were either different types or placed at different times, and light colours like this were not too bad, easy to cut back with the yellow. You do have to really thin these paints down though, so you don't get visible brush strokes, which means you have to put down multiple coats and layers before you get a solid fill. The thing is though, I would still get brush strokes sometimes, so I'd have to wait for the paint to dry so that I could go back, sand over it and then paint it again, which as you can imagine is another long and tedious process. Other than that though, these lighter colours all went down okay. The pipes and the black and the grey areas on the other hand were a whole different ballgame, especially with how neat I like to be, or at least try and be. I spent such a long time cutting back and forth with these colours and the yellow to try and get everything looking nice and sharp, and when you get the black on the yellow and you've got to cut back with the yellow on the black, you've got to give it like 4 or 5 watered down layers so that you're not getting any brush strokes and you're getting a nice solid colour. It's a whole thing. You see, pretty much all of the toys that I make on this channel, I like to create in a retro style. So like something that would have come off a production line in the 80s or the early 90s. I don't like to do lots of dry brushing. I don't like to use colour washers or speed paints really, or go around edge highlighting everything. That's not a retro toy look to me. I like all of my stuff in solid block colours and basic gradients. That's the look that I always love the most. Although because I go for this look, there's no room for error. You can't hide any mistakes, and it basically means that you just have to keep cutting back indefinitely until things are sharp and clean looking. As I've mentioned as well, this figure was broke down into 19 different pieces, 6 articulation parts and then 13 actual toy pieces that all needed to be painted, all painted separately as well and then assembled afterwards. And some parts were simple as well and were just 1 or 2 colours, but then other bits like the shoulder pads and the arms were so big that they were almost like painting a whole separate figure. I also made a bit of a mistake as well and forgot to put the number 2 emblem on the shoulder pad, so I went back, sculpted it in and reprinted, sanded and primed new ones, just because not only did I not want to leave out big details like that, but it also meant that I could add some more red into the figure, and I always like to incorporate as many bold colours into these toys as possible. Now, although it might not seem like it because of the way that I edit all this stuff together, it actually took around 5 days of solid painting before I got these parts all finished. I painted 2 sets as well, which obviously made everything twice as long, but because I was sending one to Ben and I wanted one for my own archive, I had to make 2. So once everything was finished, or as finished as it could be, because I always want to go back and spend more time on everything, as always, I got them outside, got the parts all lacquered and varnished, and finally got that yellow paint job all nice and protected. Now this is normally when I'd be showing you the final reveal shots of the finished toy, but this figure is just not finished yet. I've still not tried his articulation properly to know if it'll work. I have glued these pegs in place and they fit really nice, but I don't know if things are going to be rubbing together. I've not had a chance to try that articulation just yet. If it doesn't work though, I don't know what I'm going to do, so that's something that I'm going to try off camera. One thing I did want to talk to you about though before I wrap this whole thing up is I did mention earlier on in the episode that I wanted to try something different with his eye, something that I've not tried before, and that's basically fitting an LED inside it. So I've wanted to incorporate some LED lights into my toys and into my builds for quite a long time, so this felt like a really good excuse to do it. Now I'm no electrician or anything like that. I do understand simple LED wiring, but I've never had to do anything this small. Whenever I've wired LEDs, it's always been to AA batteries or to a USB pack or to a block 9-volt battery, but none of that will fit inside here. So I had to basically do a bit of research and find out what kind of LED I could fit to a little tiny battery and a switch and would fit it all in the back here so I could close it up with a backpack. And after doing a little bit of digging around and asking some of my friends and things, I've come up with all this stuff that I've got in front of me. And hopefully I've sorted it, but I don't really know how I'm going to fit it all inside. The little lens that I made for his eye is the smallest thing that I've ever 3D printed. So I've got to work out how to glue that on the front without making a mess. I've also then got to feed a little LED light down the back there, hope that it's not too bright, hope that it's not too dull, hope that this lens doesn't diffuse it too much. And some of these are really small, like a tiny little Lego kit piece, but obviously perfect for toys and things. Now, like I said, I did buy quite a lot. This is kind of overkill, but I wanted to make sure that I had lots of options. I didn't want to start doing this and then be like, oh, I wish I'd have bought this instead. So yeah, got lots of different things here that will be able to be incorporated into future toys and future builds. But if you want to help support things like this, you want to help support what I'm doing here on the channel, I do have a Patreon that you can join, which is very helpful. All that money goes directly back into me and into these projects and helps me make this channel and what I'm doing here bigger and better than ever, and allows me to try new things like this, because like I said, I bought quite a lot, but it's definitely worth it. So what I'm going to do now is try and fit this inside here. I'll probably use a little bit of clear UV resin and things instead of glue. And yeah, hopefully his articulation works. And when I next catch up with you, hopefully this whole thing will be all finished, all ready for his close-up and all ready for his final reveal. We will see. And there he is, all finished. My Slimehouse retro reimagining of Ben Morrow's Huxley. A toy that's been an absolute honour to bring to life, allowed me to really challenge myself in certain areas and learn some new techniques as well, which is always a real bonus. I know that I did have to change some stuff ever so slightly. A little bit of the detail has been reduced. The pipes on his chest in the original hang a bit lower, but I wanted to be able to make his waist turn, so I had to reduce them in length just a little bit. But overall, I still feel like I retained the essence of the character, and that's always what's most important to me. I also feel like I really pushed the Nomad app to the limits with this build. It's been made up in more pieces than anything that I've ever created before, and like I mentioned earlier in the video, is by far the most complex toy that I've ever made. The articulation also came out really nice, and although I was a bit worried that he wouldn't be able to stand up, as you can see I got the balancing just right, and you can raise his arms completely off the ground and he stands nice and sturdy, so that's another great bonus. I also printed the body hollow so that you could hide all that wiring inside, which means that you can turn the light switch on and off and then snap this little backpack really satisfyingly back into place. Just another little extra that I think came out really good. As I briefly mentioned earlier as well, I actually made 2 identical ones of these. So one for Ben and then one to keep for my own collection, which did make this whole project even longer, but it were definitely worth it to make one for myself and for my shelf and for my archive, and honestly, it might be my favourite toy that I've made yet on the channel. That might though just be my own personal bias opinion because I made it and I've been staring at it for so long. Before we wrap this video up, we should also find out what Ben thinks, because up until now, he's not actually seen it yet. Ben Morrow, it's an absolute pleasure to be able to speak to you face to face and to be able to show you this toy. And just for the audience, so that everybody knows that you've not seen anything yet, right?
No, haven't seen anything.
I purposely kind of did that. I didn't want to be showing you like little bits and bats. It was very tempting to do so. So yeah, without further ado, I'm just going to screen share it to you. And yeah,
sure.
I'd just love to know what you think as your first reaction. We'll just go for it. Are you ready? I'm ready.
Ready.
Okay.
Oh, that's cool. I can already see stuff that I recognize.
Yeah, I know it's jittery.
Wow.
I know it's like playing in a jittery way, but...
Right. No, that's really cool. I can already see things.
There we go.
Oh, wow. That's really cool, man.
And I went for the light in its eye. It's the first time I've ever like incorporated like LEDs into a figure.
That's really cool. It's far out because like I sculpted the original in ZBrush, so it's super cool to see like...
Yeah, and I also didn't want to just try and recreate the exact toy again. Yeah. I knew that you had a 3D filer that you could print it whenever you want. So I'm thinking, how does this look like a retro toy? How would it look if it was made back then? Simplifying things, but still trying to keep the character there.
That's super cool. I remember someone told me, you know, a character's strong if you can simplify it and make a super stylized version, almost like an anime chibi version, and you know exactly what it is, and like you can tell. Like I feel like even with this being slightly stylized, like, oh man, like...
Well, it's been such a pleasure to recreate in that style because it's such a strong and unique design. It's like nothing else I've ever seen.
It's almost more like it's almost like... Because like when I made the trailer stuff, we had to make it more realistic, but this feels almost like the comic book version.
Yeah,
like
I tried to mix the both.
Really cool.
Yeah, I tried to mix both, and he's got a bit of articulation on his waist.
And it moves. That's awesome.
So I do a whole bit on like the articulation and things, and because he had such a big arm, trying to balance it, you got a little switch in the back there so you can click his little backpack in, and that's how you turn his light on and off.
That's awesome.
But yeah, trying to make the arm so it wasn't acting as a third leg, so it could be lifted up. That was like a whole little thing in its own, because it's fine doing it in digital. And obviously there's one each, one for me and one for you there.
That's awesome. Yeah, I mean, we kind of went back and forth on like, how does he walk? Because like, it's like a gorilla a little bit on his arm, but it looks a little weird sometimes.
And with a big arm,
have to make him a character.
His arm's like a fiddler crab or something. You've got like the giant arm. Obviously, like whatever it was used for before, he's got like this. He needed this big claw arm, and his claw is a little more chunky, just like a little bit more action figure-y on the hand. But yeah, there he is.
Super cool, man. That's so cool to see. Yeah, I'm glad I didn't get any previews of that. Like, it's really awesome.
And I also tried to come from a point of view of like, if a factory was making this, where would they want to put articulation? Where would they want to reduce the tooling costs down by simplifying some things? But then there's also stuff where, because his arm is so big, like that shoulder pad, the big shoulder pad, and the arm underneath is like a separate piece, and his claw is a separate piece, so I could print certain bits hollow and not have too much weight there. Just trying to come at it as if it was something that was getting taken to a factory to be recreated, and how would that look? And then like having some articulation, but obviously not too much, because a figure from like the late 80s, early 90s, generally, unless it's like a G.I. Joe kind of thing, like if it's a Street Shark or something, it's going to have pretty reduced articulation, and we want like a cool pose when it stood static, but still be able to move it around.
Did you do much, like, I remember when we did the CG stuff, we kind of faked a little bit, because there was like if he did this, it would clip through his head, or like this
I talk all about that in the video. Yeah, I had to do certain things where, because I noticed like I couldn't make his elbow bend without like a little bit that extended forward or something, so I just did his arm as one solid piece, and again like the shoulder pad could clip into the antenna if it was too close, so I had to like, I did quite a few, I did like 20 different types of articulation before I got one that worked well. So he's awesome. All 3D printed, mostly hollow. The little articulation pegs are FDM printed, so they slot in after, you know, so that you've got no resin grinded away on itself, so you can turn it as much as you like. And then it's all printed hollow with like a hollow in his eye, and then a separate 3D printed little lens that's UV resined in with the light. I should just tell you, because I've got one here next to me in front of me.
I was going to ask, so are you like doing like liquid resin printing for a lot of the parts, or is it like molded, or?
No, well, you'll see it all in the video. He's all 3D. Now, as I'm sure you can guess, we spent quite a long time talking, so I'm not going to include the rest of the whole conversation. He had lots of questions about the toy and how I made it. I wanted to ask him about his work and what he's got coming next. All stuff that, for the record, sounds very exciting. But as you can probably tell, it was really cool to be able to show Ben the finished toy and get some inside scoop on where the Huxley story and the world and the whole brand is going to be going next.
Pretty serious story, and kind of making cool things for a pretty big audience, I think, that people will enjoy.
Well, I'm ready for it, man. I just want to say thanks again for taking the time to do this, and I'm so glad you liked it. It's a massive weight off my mind, and I look forward to you getting it in person.
Yeah, thanks so much. It was incredible to see this come to life, and I think it looks awesome.
If you enjoyed this video today, then as always, please don't forget to give it a like, and if you haven't already, subscribe to the channel. I want to say a massive thank you to Thames and Hudson for commissioning this video, and of course to Ben for trusting me with something that means so much to him, and I'm really relieved that he liked it, so that's a big weight off my mind. As always as well, I want to say a massive thank you to you lot for checking out this video today. I worked around the clock for like a month to get this one finished, so it really does mean a lot that you're here and you watched it, and yeah, I'd love to know what you think, so let me know down in the comments below. What did you think of my Huxley build? Is there any other characters in that world that you'd love to see me turn into toys? Also, if you want to find out more about the Huxley characters and the Huxley world, as I've mentioned a few times, this graphic novel is out now and it's incredible, it's beautiful, and I'd love you to experience it. So I'll put a link to it down in the description below so that you can pick yourself a copy up and yeah, get involved in the world of Huxley. Now, this book was published by Read Only Memory, an imprint of Thames and Hudson, who have not only worked on Huxley, but have published loads of really cool video game and other world building books, both available now on their website and coming up in the future as well, which all look amazing from the sneak previews that I've seen. So if you're interested in any of that kind of stuff, retro gaming and all those kind of things, then I've left a link to their website below so that you can check out everything that they've got going on, because yeah, some of them other books that they're putting out genuinely look amazing. But with all that said and done, I'm going to wrap it up there. Once again, thank you so much for checking out this video today. With all of the other stuff that you could be watching on YouTube, it really does mean a lot that you come back here every single time I drop a video, which is like once a month at the minute. But I really do appreciate you being here, and I hope to catch you in the next one. So until then, I'm Theo Kane, this is Slimehouse TV, and I'm gone. Pow.